So I'm really excited to have Brent Otto as my guest today. Brent Otto SJ, which is Society of Jesus. And Brent, anything I read in the intro, if it's incorrect, this is my Googling, so just correct me later on. But I'll read out what I dug up on you, right? Brent is a historian of modern South Asia. He's a Ph.D. candidate at UC Berkeley, specializing in colonial and post-colonial South Asia, which I'm really interested to learn about. You explore race, caste, Indian Christianity, and missionary education. Brent has ministered and researched across the US, the UK, India, and beyond. He's also the managing editor of the Journal of Global Catholicism and the co-editor of the International Journal of Anglo-Indian Studies, which is a great resource for all Anglos to check out. I did not know it existed. Brent, if anything was incorrect, correct me on that, but I'm really glad to speak with you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be meeting you and to have this conversation. Nothing you said was incorrect. So, I'm just pleased to be a part of this project that you're undertaking. It's amazing to see how Anglo-Indians are connecting in new ways. At this time across the globe and especially through social media and these electronic means. But that's, in a sense, it isn't exactly a new phenomenon. Like where Anglo-Indians in touch back in, I think, the 80s started to connect people, and it's only deepened since then.
Yeah, I think it's just quicker now, right? That's about it. But if not, people were constantly I think we would write letters like dear whatever to your friend. And now if I wrote a letter to my friend, like why are you being weird? Right?
Retro.
But I also had to Google up what SJ meant. I thought it was I thought you were just a senior Jesuit, but it's not. It's a Society of Jesus. So before we dive into and just to break it down for the listeners, right? I want to. There's so many things I want to talk to Brent about. Obviously, his research work and his Anglo-Indian roots. I just want to get to know him, his life, his life growing up, his identity with one parent being Anglo. How was he raised? Did he speak any? Does his mom transfer any Anglo-Indian words and phrases to him? Does it come out during mass all of a sudden? Stuff like that. But then also I want to, I've never spoken to a Jesuit priest. I went to Loyola College. I went to all the Jesuit-run schools, right? And the Salesians. But I'm curious. I've never really sat down and spoken to a Jesuit priest. So there are so many things that I want to ask and talk. So let's break it down let's get to know you personally. Tell us about your life growing up, your parents, and your mom is Anglo. With that, tell us about you.
Well, I grew up here in Massachusetts in the U.S., so I was born in 1979. My mother had migrated with her parents to the U.S. from Calcutta in 1969, and she met my dad and got married in 1973, and he's a German American from New Jersey, from southern New Jersey. So, my mother came fairly young. She was just 18. So basically as she was becoming an adult, she moved to the U.S. So she's had her whole adult life here. And, I think the fact that there often is on first-generation immigrants, especially those who are, coming into adulthood, a social pressure to assimilate quickly. And, it's hard enough to launch into adulthood. It's even harder to transition to a new country and culture at that time. So, I think she was thinking forward, not thinking back as much to her childhood, though it remained very important to her. Also, unlike Anglo-Indians who, like myself, who are part Anglo-Indian, who are born in outside of India, those who are in Australia or the UK or maybe Canada, Toronto, or places like that, where there is a big established Anglo-Indian community, that isn't the case in the US. And so I grew up with cultural elements at home that I later could name as Anglo-Indian, but because they weren't attached to a larger circle of friends and relatives and that kind of thing, I didn't really name it as such
Yeah.
at the time. And it was only later when, as an adult, I went to India and spent a year and then connected very much with the community in Toronto too, and then in Australia, that I really came to realize, like, wow, my experiences growing up were part of something much larger, a
Yeah.
cultural phenomenon much larger, community much larger, and left me with a sense of uh, owning in a new way and being able to name in a new way
Yeah.
this part of my background.
Wow, I think you put some good words to that, like naming it, right? Because I see you and I see my kids' future, right? Because I'm the only Anglo-Indian in the marriage. My wife is Caucasian, so it's kind of reverse in your
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
And my kids, and I like you said, there's no Anglo-Indian community that they can go and be part of, and they're just going to, so they would grow up like you, right? And then later on, they would put it together. Oh, this was
mm,
Anglo-Indian, not Indian in general, but this is very unique to an Anglo-Indian culture, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
So that's fascinating. And your mom, right? At 18, many people at that age in their lives are questioning a lot, right? What am I going to do? Is my future? And
mm,
she had to question more than that, right? She was here in a different country, right? So that's quite a big challenge. So she sounds like a strong woman, first of all, to just leave the country. Did she come by herself or with a family or for her
no,
studies?
with my grandparents, they came
Okay.
together. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it must have been must have felt like a time of uncertainty for
Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
because it was a bit of a, in some ways, England in some ways would have seemed to be the more natural place for them to go,
Yeah.
because my grandmother is one of 9 children, and she's the youngest, and so um, most of her siblings were in England, and so like it would have made sense to go there. But then my grandfather, two of his sisters were in the U.S., and they had been here since 1946
Oh, wow.
because they were secretaries working on the Allied base in Calcutta during the war, and met and married American officers. And then when the war was over, they came back to the States with them on the troop ship. So for really more than 2 decades, they were telling my grandfather, "Why did you come? Why didn't you bring the family?"
Oh, wow.
And so finally they did, but it took more than 20 years for them to
Yeah.
do that. And really the reason was they were enjoying their life in India. And my grandfather, he didn't work for the railways or for others of the government services, where the reservations for Anglo-Indians, diminished over time. From 1950, when the Constitution was imposed, it was a 10-year stretch of diminishing reservations. So it didn't affect him because he worked for a
Got
private
it.
company,
Yeah.
kind of a British company that, Shaw Wallace. A lot of people know
Yep.
that
Yep.
company
Yep.
by name. They hardly exist anymore,
Yeah.
but they there's one concern. They had many different industries, and he was in the flour milling division.
Yeah.
But people know it from the liquor division.
Yeah. Yep.
Hayward.
Haywards. Yes.
Hayward's
Yes.
5,000 or whatever it is. That beer is
It
still.
made sense. He had the grain, and the next progression was let's ferment it, right?
Yeah, right, right. So in that sense, work-wise, he transferred his skill set from a career in the wheat industry in India to the wheat industry in the U.S. So
Oh, nice. Yeah.
that's why it kind of also made sense,
Yeah.
as in addition to the
Yeah.
family connection. So I mean, they were fortunate. He got a job pretty much right away, and my mother, as now a young adult, now she also was looking for a job right away.
Yeah.
And like so many Anglo-Indian young women, she'd done a secretarial course and after finishing school, and but there are differences. I know Anglo-Indian friends who they were teachers in India, and then when they went to Canada or elsewhere, the qualifications weren't accepted,
Yep.
and they had to redo everything. in that system, or they had to figure out a different career
Yep.
path.
Yep. Um, yeah. So speaking of that, I think Kevin Ward would be upset with me if I don't mention his name.
Right. Yes.
You've
He's one
been,
of us. Yes.
yes, exactly when you said that, right? And you are one of the most highly recommended people. Almost everybody I speak with, like, you should speak to Brent. Yes, I want to speak. Yes, I connected with him, like Kevin and Joy. Just great people. Kevin Ward, obviously good friends. Now, your mom's from Calcutta, so I'm guessing that's the connection, right?
Well, yeah, yes. Although it's interesting. Of course, the Wards are the kind of Anglo-Indians who know everybody.
Yes.
They're friends with everybody, and so it. I actually met them in the San Francisco area through my cousin Bert Payne, um, and and through church, because I began to go to this once a month to first Saturdays, which were masses in honor of Our Lady of Elencunny. And so there's a
Oh,
large
really?
Catholic community comes together every Saturday, first Saturday of the month, for an evening mass, the vigil for Sunday. And the wards were there, and others of their relatives and friends. And so basically at that mass, let's say the majority is Tamilian Catholics, some Malayalis, and Anglo-Indians, and a few Christians from the north who are Hindi speakers. But it's a wonderful gathering, and that's one of the places where I
Yeah.
connected with a
Yeah.
circle of Anglo-Indians.
Yeah. I think if you meet Kevin once, you're like his friend for life. Yeah, he has
That's
that enveloping character. He's such a good guy. But I'm surprised, like Velankani in the Bay Area. I mean, have you been to Madras, the South? Have you been to Velankani?
Yeah, I've actually
Oh,
written
nice.
about Velankani
Oh, really?
with Robin Andrews.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll have to send me an email. I'll follow up with you. I would love to get all your books that you've written because that's so fascinating. I've been to Velankani. It's such a pilgrimage as a Roman Catholic growing up, right?
Mhm.
Or taking the train ride. We would see people, friends of ours would walk all the way to Velankani for like days. And
Yeah.
you're telling me like there's something like that happens, like a devotion in the Bay Area is like news to me. And I'm sure the people in the South who make that pilgrimage will be like, they feel good to hear that.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. That particular parish has as their parish priest is a South Indian guy, although he has an interesting history because his father worked for a company, and he spent, I think, most of his childhood in the Northeast in Assam. Um, but he's a Malayali by ethnicity. In any case, he has a great devotion to Mary, and when he was assigned to that parish, he realized that many people have a great devotion to Mary, and so he just fostered that and enabled them to do mostly whatever they wanted. And so, in fact, there's a Marian garden outside, and there's Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Elencunny, Our Lady of Fatima,
No way.
Guadalupe, and so you've got the Filipino
Yeah.
Catholics and the Anglo Catholics and the
Yeah.
So
That's so cool. That's so
yeah,
cool to hear.
yeah,
That's a great surprise. So one thing you said, I want to go back. You said the Allied base, right?
right.
Did the Americans have a huge presence there? Oh,
Yeah, so after Burma fell to the Japanese
yeah.
and the British retreated to India, the U.S. Joined with the British forces to regroup and ultimately, retake India. So these two uncles, great uncles of mine, who married my grandfather's sisters, they were in the U.S. At the time was called Army Air Force. Air Force wasn't a separate division, I think, until after the war. In any case, flying like reconnaissance missions and that type of thing.
Wow.
And in fact, one of them, he came back to the U.S. and he was actually a pilot. The other one was not a pilot. And he ended up having a career with, I think it was United Airlines
Oh, really?
for the rest of his.
I'm embarrassed to say I did not know much about the American influence in India during that time period and the collaboration with the British. I need to read up on that for sure. If you have any book
Sure.
recommendations, definitely let me
Well,
know.
it's interesting. So a lot of Calcutta Anglo-Indians are friends with Anglo-Burmese who came as refugees into India
Yeah.
when the Japanese invaded. And so, in a way, the Anglo-Burmese and Anglo-Indian stories, which are distinct, um, in a place like Calcutta got woven together because many didn't go back to Burma after the war. They, especially those who were like at that critical point in life, they finished their education because of the war in India, and so they ended up getting jobs in India rather than trying to go back.
Do you
Um,
think Assam was, or that northeast corridor was like the New York, where the immigrants entered and that's where they found and they settled when they left Burma, right? Most of them came in. That was the only path into India, right? Um, I would imagine.
Well, people came in different ways. So some had it easy, some had it hard. So, some actually went right through the jungles. And,
Oof.
Burma is sort of north to south, has these kind of mountain ranges and gorges and
Yeah.
rivers. And to cross it east to west is extremely hard. And people died in that process, and malaria and so on, snakes and dangerous
Yeah.
circumstances. There's some memoirs and books that have been written about that. One, I'm forgetting the author, but I remember the title. I think it's called Through the Tiger Jungle. Um,
Hmm.
Others, like a few friends of mine, who became neighbors to my grandparents and my mother and uncle in Calcutta, they were evacuated by air
Oh wow.
because they were, connections, right?
Yeah.
If you're
Sure.
working for the right people, etc.
Yeah.
And they were evacuated into India. And so one family I know, they were evacuated to Coimbatore. They first to Calcutta, but then they dispersed them to different places. So like I think it was in Coimbatore, there's a government college which was turned into refugee housing. But like quite decent,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
like a full college classroom for a family to live in.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so so there are different
Sure.
degrees of suffering,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. Have you? I know you've spoken to Dorothy McMiniman as well. I'm
Yes,
recently, and I see you're friends with Deborah Nixon as well.
right.
And I really am embarrassed to hear this, the Anglo-Indian perspective, or in any perspective of the partition, right? The
Hmm.
stories, and how brutal it was. The stories that they were telling me is like so painful and so traumatic, um, and maybe it's my memory, but I don't remember learning about all those things in school.
Hmm.
Maybe it was just a side note, but yeah, yeah, it's like some had it easy and some had it like the worst possible, like they were slaughtered to death. It's a horrible time period.
Yeah.
So I've had this newfound passion of just learning as much as I can about that time period. So speaking with you makes it a whole lot easier because you can just tell me all these things and I'll just take notes. If you see me writing down, that's what I'm doing.
Sure.
So, so did you grow up? Obviously, you're a Jesuit priest now, but
Mm.
did you grow up? Was your family? Was your mom? Did she instill those Catholic values? Did you grow up in a religious family, or was it? How was your upbringing as far as a religious sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, my dad's side, well, he was raised Lutheran, but after meeting my mother, he began to go to Catholic church with her, and they were married in the Catholic church. As for my mother, her parents, my grandmother is Catholic, and my grandfather was um, Anglican Church of North India. Um, and I say Anglican because Church of North India was established a couple of years after they left from Calcutta. 71 is when the Anglicans, I think Methodists and Presbyterians amalgamated into the CNI. And the CSI is older, so you'd
Oh,
be more
really?
familiar with
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The CSI, I think, might be 1944 or something.
yeah. My dad was part of the CSI. My dad was Protestant. My mom was Catholic, so my mom won out as well. So we all went to the Roman Catholic Church.
So in my grandparents' case, they said we have two kids. One will be raised Catholic, the other will be raised Anglican. So my uncle, he went to he went to the Protestant boarding school in Darjeeling, St. Paul's, and my mother stayed home. She went to Loreto, of
Loreto.
which there are something like, let me think, six Loreto schools just in Calcutta.
Oh wow, no way, really.
Incredible concentration of.
What's the why I'm okay, so I'm assuming there's some history with the name Loreto because with the school that I went to had a sister from it. I think she was from Italy, and her name was Loreto. So I'm
Yes.
guessing that's a saint, or so there's a history behind
Well,
the
Our
name.
Lady of Loreto,
Oh, really?
and so it's sort of a legend kind of thing that, so when when Jesus was crucified, from the cross he said to John and to Mary, "Behold your mother, behold your son," right? So Saint John was said to have then taken Mary into his home and ultimately ended up in what is modern day Turkey in a place called Ephesus. I think the Loreto legend goes that angels carried the house of Our Lady to Italy, to Loreto, and put it there.
Oh, okay.
If I recall, in one of the churches in Rome, this house has been moved or erected in that church.
Oh, is there like a house that you can go see now? Or is that like
Yeah, I
oh,
believe it's
really?
inside the church itself.
Oh wow, no way. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Wow. It makes sense now.
but the Loreto sisters who founded the schools in India, they were um, an Irish institute with some French origins. Their immediate founder of the Irish branch that went to India was Mary Ward. Um,
Wait, is that no? Is that any relation to Kevin Ward? I don't know.
Maybe very far back.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay.
Mary Ward, I think she's probably a 18th century figure,
Oh, okay, okay.
18,
I'm
19th.
not even sure Kevin would know that,
Yeah.
but that's fascinating. Yeah. So you grew up. So where you kind of like go to church every Sunday morning? You had.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We went to church, but my father actually didn't become Catholic. He would always go to church with us, but
Yeah.
he didn't go through the RCIA program and become Catholic until my brother was probably 8 years old or so. Um, so yeah, we were a religious family, but not. Um, what can I say? Not uber religious.
Yeah. 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 So when did you? I've only had one other friend, one other person, my neighbor, who went into the priesthood.
Mhm.
So when did you realize this was what you wanted to do?
Well, it's interesting because I think one of the pivotal things was that, like a lot of kids do, a lot of Catholic children do. I was an altar server, so was
Yeah.
my brother, and you know what? I feel that brought me close to ritual, paying more attention to the scriptures and preaching, and even before the young mind can understand
Yeah.
on a cognitive level everything's going on kind of a heart level, you sense that there's something sacred is happening, something good
Yeah.
is happening, God is here, that type of a feeling. So I really attribute that parish experience of, week in and week out ritual and being a part of it, to being kind of the seeds. But it was really when I came to college. I had not gone to Catholic schools at all growing up. It was only when I came to college that was my first experience of Catholic education. And I came to the Jesuit college where I now am working
Oh, nice.
after many, years,
Yeah.
after 23 years since I graduated, I've
Yeah.
come back. Um, and here, I think I went from having the faith of a child to having the faith of an adult, um, and the Jesuit way of praying was praying using the full imagination, and I don't know, studying scripture and studying spirituality, and having a community in which to do that is really where my sense of call to priesthood emerged.
Yeah. And that's when you kind of had an inkling like, hey, I want to be a priest. And how do you once you have that, who do you go and speak to? Is there like and pardon my terms, I just like, is that like priest? Is it, do you call it seminary? Is that where you?
Yeah, that's a fine term for it. Seminary
Okay.
is the generic, kind of term.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in a religious order like the Jesuits or say Franciscans or Dominicans, the entry point to the order is a period called the novitiate. So novices, you're a novice for a period of time. The church requires a minimum of 1 year. The Jesuits, we do 2 years. And that's sort of the initial stage to sort of say, is this really right for you? And at the
Got
end
it.
of that time, and it's sort of prayer and study and so on, then if you get through that, then you take your first vows and then go on to study philosophy and do ministry and study theology and then eventually be ordained. So for Jesuits, if you come in having an undergraduate degree already, then it's about 11 years.
No, what? Really?
In
Wow.
India, most people who join the Jesuits, they do so from class 10. And for them, it's be about 20 years because they've got to do their plus two,
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
higher secondary, and then undergraduate studies and so on. So,
Man,
but for us, it's typically,
that's intense.
yeah.
11 years. Wow. Yeah, but before we move ahead, I want to say like your pronunciation of Coimbatore and Malayalam is like spot on. Yeah, it's like you grew up in Coimbatore. So clearly there is either you've inherited some of that from your mom or your travels. It's you don't say it like, even my wife would not say it like that. She's Caucasian, but clearly your pronunciation is spot on.
Well, thank you. I've spent a lot of time. I struggled trying to learn Malayalam as well.
Yeah.
For two summers in Thiruvananthapuram.
Now we're showing off.
Then once we got there, the teacher said, "None of this Trivandrum. Don't say Trivandrum.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
colonial word. Say
yeah,
it properly,
yeah.
Thiruvananthapuram."
That's amazing.
I
So
didn't make much progress with that
yeah,
beyond
Malayalam,
pronunciation.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it's very
So how
hard.
many languages are you fluent in?
Oh, I'd hardly claim fluency. I think that's,
Yeah,
some people are more gifted. I am not
yeah,
particularly gifted
yeah,
with language,
yeah,
but Spanish and Portuguese I'm the
yeah.
strongest with, and for Indian languages, Hindi and Malayalam I've studied.
It's amazing. How do you, it? I'm trying to read you at the same time, and I like you're like a fascinating person. It seems like, first of all, you're a pretty smart guy. Um, and it seems like you're a sponge. I can already tell you do a ton of reading, not even by looking at the books at the back there, right? Yeah, but clearly to study all these languages, you're clearly curious and an intelligent person, and a smart guy. You know, which is why I'm curious to know about your research. How did you get interested in? Do you think you would have been interested in the field you're interested in if your mom wasn't an Anglo, or is that, I'm sure that played a huge
It made a
part?
huge difference. It made a huge difference. I haven't said that much about my upbringing, but I'm the first child. Now my parents only have two. It's myself and my younger brother, but I'm the first child of my parents, but I'm also the first child in my generation in the family. So I had a lot of time with my grandparents from
Yeah,
India and my mother and my uncle as well. And because I was the first one in the family born outside of India, well, from that side of the
yeah,
family, I think, it just, you're a parent, like when, especially with the first child, the flood of memories must be really strong
yeah,
when you're thinking about and trying to figure out how do I raise a child? How do I teach them? What do I do? You immediately go back to what was done for you.
yeah,
And I really think that my mother was very much in that mode, and my grandparents, of course, the only way of raising a child is the way they had done so in India.
yeah,
And so it was in the stories that they told me, and I mean, even I I remember as a little one being taught ak, nak,
No.
mu, jib, all this stuff, all
Yeah.
the Hindi, and then the Hindi words
Yeah.
for the body parts
Yeah.
and all that. I remember my mother teaching me the Indian national anthem.
Yeah.
She didn't know the American one quite so much,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that I learned in school, of
Yeah.
course. But she had me singing Jana Gana Mana,
Huh.
before I was in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So it's these kinds of things which are like very precious to me, and I think I got it more than my brother because it really wasn't that many years before that they first came to the States. And being the first child, I think the memory place that they went back to was their own upbringing and so on. So, but it all made sense for me, started to make sense for me so much more. And I began to claim it when here in college, I studied colonial history and that, and a professor of mine said, "Why don't you see if you can put together a research proposal and see if you can get funding after you graduate to do a project?" And she guided me, and I proposed to study Catholic education in India and how Indian Catholic schools navigate, the religious pluralism of their student body,
Yep.
where, I mean, there's hardly any Catholic school where you'd have more than 10%, 15% of the students are Christian. So what does it mean to be a Catholic school when 90% of your students are other faiths, So I had done my teacher training also. So, thinking about how education works and how you run a school and what values you um, convey, how you measure the effectiveness of education, because it's character formation, not just,
Yeah.
intellectual
Sure.
training. And so I made this application and I got it. So I went off to India after I graduated from college. I really didn't know anything about research methods or I had never been to India before, never went as a child.
Oh,
So it was an
wow.
amazing year of learning a lot in a short time. And my experience of India was filtered to some degree, or the way was paved through relatives and friends. That was wonderful. And then a lot of new friends that I made along the way who shared with me their life experience, their thought about India,
Yeah.
the many Anglo-Indians I met
Yeah.
also talking about
Yeah.
their own sense of their own identity. And so it was through English medium Catholic schools that I really learned about the larger Anglo-Indian community and this heritage. That was my window into the Anglo-Indian community, was through education.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah, it's spot on, like yeah, like it's so, like, I even tell my, obviously here there's the constant political debate, right, of just church and keep religion out of schools and all of that. But growing up and going to the school, to the Catholic school, or whichever, or Christian or Protestant school, I went to both.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody would just say, like the Hindus and the Muslims, everybody would just say the stand there while they said the Our Father in the morning for assembly time, right? There was no like, you are excused from this, right? And nobody, it was just part of life. It was just an understanding. I'm going to this Catholic school and there's going to be some amount of Catholicism involved in my education. But then there was like, we had a dedicated period for like catechism, and I think the non-Catholics would go do something else like social science or not. But it's not, when I first came here, like it was a strange concept for me. It's like there was no Christian, well, there are Christian schools, but like public schools are not not religious at all, but because people are so offended. But over there, maybe now things are changing, but I think still, if you go to a Christian school, you just, if you're non-Christian, you kind of adopt some of that while you're there.
Yes.
You
At the same time, I think most Catholic schools in India try very hard to be inclusive and
Yeah.
not to make
Yeah.
anybody feel, kind of
Yeah.
feel bad that they're not
Yeah.
Christian or.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So did you do? Obviously, you did not grow. How old were you when you went to India? And did you go to Calcutta? Was that your first?
Yeah, so I went first to Calcutta because it seemed to make sense. And I was 21, so I just graduated from college and I went off to India. And I had the most uncanny experience in the first day or two. And that was that, of course, I was landing in the place where both my grandparents were born, where my mother and my uncle were born. And though I had never been there before, I had studied, the map and, just more or less in advance to get a sense of where things are. Okay, I'm staying here. Auntie lives over here. My friends live over there. I, 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 I felt like I'd been there before. I just felt completely at home, like I belonged there, almost as if this was familiar, even though it wasn't.
Wow.
And I think I put that down to the stories that form our human consciousness and our personality. And for me, a lot of those stories were the things I heard as a child. So I went down the street and I'm remembering my mother talking about being in the church at the break time, at school. It's this church that she was
Wow.
talking
Yeah.
about. And then going down this lane, and my grandfather, grew up here, and
Wow.
meeting someone and she telling me, I remember your great grandmother, and when she died, all the shops closed, and you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's these being in the place and connecting it with the stories that one has
Yeah.
heard growing
Yeah.
up made such a feeling of at homeness that
Yeah.
was really uncanny, and I've never experienced that anywhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. That's such a cool experience. It's almost like there is a movie. It could be a movie, right? There's something strange about that experience, right? Not
Mm.
having been to a place, but just being told, and it's like coming home to a place that's just been home, like in a story form, but now you actually set foot there and see things for real.
Mm.
Um, you know. So I'm really,
I mean, I take that to be a spiritual
yeah,
thing that 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 our existence is a lot more connected
yeah,
than meets the eye,
yeah,
and we get little glimpses of that, and we
yeah,
feel it
yeah.
at times. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm curious, like, how do you, your like, maybe it's my perception, like, as a priest, right? Is your whole worldview? Are you filtering everything through that a spiritual filter? Like every decision, or is that how you filter? Because maybe it's a silly question, even, right? Because
Mm.
I don't have that extra thing in me, so my filter is just totally different. So do you filter everything through? Um, is this kind? Is this patient? Right. That for me, that sounds like extra work, not for you because that's more natural. Is that a thing even? Like, how do you filter? What's your worldview, and how do you filter things?
Yeah, I mean, we are whole persons, right?
Yeah.
We can talk about our spiritual lives and our professional lives and our
Yeah.
family life and these
Yeah.
different. We can talk about them as separate things, but we really are just one person, and we inhabit these somewhat different worlds and have these different dimensions of ourselves. So, I spend a lot of my time, I'm teaching, I'm doing research, I'm writing, I'm working with colleagues, or, you know, I'm at the church, I'm preaching, or I'm hearing a confession, or, earlier this morning, somebody comes for spiritual direction once a month. I met with that person. Um, yeah, I mean, for me, it's just exciting because it reminds me that all of us, uh, on some level, have to integrate these parts. And so, obviously, like you see, today I'm doing academic things.
Yeah.
I've got a meeting later. We have a scholar visiting campus. I'm dressed as my colleagues would be for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not wearing the clerical collar, and yet I'm still a priest as I'm bringing myself into this part of my life. So if we try to separate them out in ourselves, I think that doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. So awesome. So,
Yeah.
okay, it's good to know. So it seems like you do have a gentler. Definitely, it has helped you. I think discipline is what the word I'm going for. Right. One of the most difficult books I read was The Celebration of Discipline, and because I think after reading that book, it kind of becomes you. So your filters get better, which is part of you. You're not putting on, like, I don't think you're putting on a priest filter for this moment and then not taking it off for another moment. So I was trying to figure out, do you think yourself as a very disciplined person, and what are those disciplines? If you've your experiences have helped craft for you and that you find really helpful.
Well, I don't know. I don't think of myself as a particularly
Oh, really?
I think I feel that I like many of us, especially in the type of society we live in right now, where especially social media and the kind of the intensity of our connectivity divides our attention all the time, and demands, sort of nips like a irritating little dog going after you to take your focus off of what you're doing and pay attention to something else. So I feel like I'm just as susceptible as anybody is to that. It is a struggle to say, no, I'm not going to deal with those things. I need to prioritize, or I'm in this role right now, and that calls this out of me, and I put that part aside. So, but I do think that the religious training in the Jesuits has been very helpful at, helping me and helping probably a lot of us know that there's a time for different things, and every day I think as human beings, we all need some silence. We need some rest. We need some prayer. We can't work 24/7. We have to face the limits of what we can do and what we can't do. What is our role and what we just need to surrender and trust, not just to God, but we have to trust each other.
Absolutely. And so I'm glad to hear you say that you struggle just like the rest of us, right? You're human just like the rest of us. Sometimes we just say, like, if somebody's a priest or a pastor, and we just assume that they're like perfect and holy and have no struggles. So it's good to hear. I have a question for you. And you can tell me if that's not something, but does confession ever take a toll on you? Like, if you keep hearing, like if you have a whole day of confession or 2 days of confession, does it ever take a toll on you, and you have to like I have to go in, I've heard too much of like bad news, and do I need to go and pray about this and get it out of my system?
I haven't been I've never been in a situation of overload from confession, because I've not done like a full day of confession or something like that. I've never been in circumstances that have made that type of demand. It is true. I think it's true that I have heard from time to time a confession that's particularly heavy. Because you really feel like, some really serious harm was done here. Someone really suffered, or someone is continuing to suffer. Sometimes it's the penitent who is suffering because though they either doubt God's forgiveness, or even if they accept God's forgiveness, they haven't allowed themselves to be forgiven.
Wow, that's
holding
great
on to it.
perspective. Yeah.
Those things those types of situations can be hard. But I actually think that most of the time with the sacrament of reconciliation, that God is really generous with mercy. And even the priest, in administering the sacrament, feels that generosity of God's mercy. God wants us all to be reconciled and wants to take away the barriers, sins and shame and things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective, because we just, as one-offs, we go for confession and just walk away. But then we just give the priest, this mystery person, and this, now it's yours, and they have to kind of deal with it, and nobody knows how that person feels. You know. So, okay, this is a little bit more lighthearted. So if you ever had confession from like kids, were you able to ever tell like, yeah, this is kind of generic? Because we had a template as kids, right? It's confession time. I've got to make up 3 things. Let's go with the generic template. Can you tell on the other side of the box, like, I think this is a template?
I did once hear a story, of a catechist who said, these 8-year-olds, it's too difficult for them to really think through what is sin and what isn't. So she made up a list and numbered it 1 through 10, the common sins of the 8-year-old or whatever. But the priest didn't know this, and they came in for their first confession. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I've committed number 7, number 5, and number 2. And he had no idea what these things were.
Oh, it's classic. That's like ordering from a menu.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I mean, I think with little kids, most of their sins, it's really about self-regulation.
Yeah.
It's about controlling their feelings and not acting on anger and jealousy and things like that.
Yeah. Is that list? I need to Google it up if that list exists. That would be hilarious. So this is more, I want to understand, and I'm just curious, right? I just want to understand how, is it called penance, or what is it that when you say like, go say these 3 Hail Marys, it's
the penance. Mm-hmm.
So how do you decide, and forgive my phrase, like what is there, like a scoring system, like how, or is that coached, or is that like, how do you decide what's the right what do you have them do?
No, it's not like a mathematical formula as such. It's really a prudential decision based on. I always think of what is going to be most helpful for this person to turn away from whatever it is that they've confessed and live more, in God's light and in the path of virtue. So, it might be an act of charity that gets them to focus less on self-concern and more on others. Or I think it's fine to also have, Our Fathers and Hail Marys be part of a penance, especially when maybe the sin is very kind of simple, ordinary, not very serious. Sometimes I'll ask people to pray for somebody that maybe they have sinned against because they're a difficult character. Well, pray for them, or ask God to show you what God loves in them.
Yeah.
Ask God to show you what God loves in that person.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm getting a lot of inside perspective. I think it makes a lot of sense, because a lot of times it can feel, you're just going for confession, and it might feel like, here's your thing, go do it. But it's nice to know that you're processing what's right for that moment, right? There's some intentionality. It's not like you don't have a number system as well, right? You go do a number 6, right? So that's really good. It's really good to know that it has, and I hope that people who go for confession takes that with a little bit more weight, that it was more thoughtful and not like a menu system, right? Do you have do you have a guilty pleasure? Is it a show that you watch, or?
I'm a bit of an aviation nerd.
Oh, nice.
So I watch a lot of YouTubes about aviation technology, crash analysis.
Nice. You've been busy then this year.
So, I just have to learn, like, that's not a good thing to be watching in the days before you take a plane trip.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a nighttime journey, you go to sleep and then you start dreaming about these crash scenarios.
Yeah.
Every little movement.
Yeah. I love that too. I think I watched this pilot. I think it's called 74 Gear or Gear 74. He's a bald-headed guy.
Yes, yeah.
Kelsey. Yeah, yeah.
Kelsey, yeah, I watched.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I love it. Me too. I do watch a lot of that. I recently watched a documentary on YouTube about the Atlanta airport, and it's $11 billion investment in making it, because they lose out to Qatar every year, and then
Oh, yeah.
no U.S. airport is in the top 10 best airports.
Mhm.
So Atlanta is trying to be in the top 10.
Yeah,
So
it's not for such a big airport. I actually think it's pretty good.
yeah, yeah,
It's quite efficient to move all those people around
yeah,
so
yeah,
quickly. Yeah.
yeah. It gets the award of the busiest airport, but they're very upset that it's not like in the best, which it should be. So what's it like being a priest in 2025?
Well, I think, in Western countries where the number of clergy is, really very low compared with the past,
Yeah.
I do feel just there is that pressure. There's a pressure in general on priests who are younger and healthy still to just be working all the time, because the needs are really endless. So it can be very tough to say no to things and to draw the line. Um, so I think that's one aspect. But I see a lot of hopefulness in the church. I was noticing here at the college and talking to other people. I've only been back here working for less than 1 year. Um, but those who've been here a long time, and I'm also comparing with many years ago when I was a student, um, things like young people have changed. So in one sense, society's become more secular, so you have fewer people actually practicing their faith. But for the last 5 years, attendance at Mass has gone up by quite a bit. It's like it's steadily increased for 5 years straight. Why it's a little bit of a mystery. Another trend, whereas the church-going student population used to be quite a lot more women than men. Now, the presence of men is at least half.
Oh wow.
So I'm not sure what exactly is happening, but what I can say is there's definitely a spiritual hunger,
Yeah.
and the reasons why some people in the past, say 20, 30, 40 years ago, rejected religion, not just Christianity, but often it had to do with they had problems and baggage with the organization, or the sins of the institutional churches. The young people now, I think, are a little they're not so close to that. So many of them are a little bit more of a blank slate. So they come with a thirst for God, for transcendence, for meaning, for community, and I think they're finding it. So I feel like it's a hopeful time. But the big challenge for society, and it's not just a religious challenge, is to build community, because even though we can be so connected now,
Yeah.
the superficiality of those connections is really damaging to people's psyche.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I go to a non-denominational church now. But there's always, when I go back, I'm in the worship team, and I know a lot of worship leaders and holding high leadership positions, a lot of thought leaders, right? And all of them have this yearning to just to be more liturgical. I think there's a general yearning for those who go to church, just have a yearning for the liturgical, and I think the young people with a blank slate are attracted to that because this is just so it's old and it makes sense, and it's so rich. I think I miss that when I go back. I'm like, oh, this is so good. Can we just be a little bit more liturgical? That would be awesome. Because sometimes I don't know how it is in the Catholic Church now, but sometimes I feel like we walk into church with a coffee in our hands. That's not how we grew up, right?
Yeah. I'm smiling because I'm thinking of the church in Decatur, and when I worked in Atlanta, some of the pastor and assistant pastors of it was a newfound church, were coming to Ignatius House, the retreat center, making retreats, and then they asked us, would you come and see what goes on at our church? And they were expressing this desire for something a bit more liturgical. And they have a barista and a coffee reception area
Yeah.
before the
Yeah.
service begins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you, and I've noticed this, a lot of the non-denominational churches do Ash Wednesday now,
Hmm.
which I was telling my wife I would love to do Ash Wednesday again, but I'm going to the source, right? I'm like I would love to go to a Roman Catholic church and just do it there, But I think it's great that you can see that shift. People are yearning to get back to the roots. I think they've strayed a little too far.
Hmm.
My kind of people, right? So how are you giving up anything for Lent? Is that a sensible thing to do, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah. So sugar, actually.
Oh, really?
I began several years ago. I decided I was going to have the sugar because I felt I couldn't drink tea or coffee without sugar, and I usually had 2 spoons, proper
Ooh,
South Asian
yeah,
style,
yeah,
masala chai. Anyway, and I halved it, and I thought, oh, that wasn't so difficult.
yeah,
And actually, I do think that it's good practice. The thing itself doesn't matter as much, but all of us human beings need a bit of the discipline. You were saying, we actually spend a lot of our energy worrying if we're going to make it, worrying if we're enough, worrying if we have enough, worrying if we're doing enough. And I think just like being able to say, I'm going to do without sugar or something,
yeah,
makes us realize God is enough.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Wow. So when you give up something, you're not just giving it up, but you're replacing it with a thought or a prayer. Every time you miss that sugar, I think, God, you're enough, as opposed to
mhm.
just not drinking sugar. But I've also given up sugar, but maybe it's not. I replaced it with this thing called monk fruit,
Hmm.
which is it's just pretty okay. But is that really giving up sugar? I don't know if I'm replacing it. Sweetness is sweetness, right?
I think if it reminds you of, if it reminds you of Jesus, if it reminds you of your faith, then it's done its job.
I love it. I, I I love that perspective. I'm getting goosebumps. Like some of the things you're saying, you're putting words that I cannot. You're describing things that I cannot definitely articulate. Thank you. Yeah. Um, so I won't keep you for too long, Brent. I'll
Might
give.
I add something?
Yes.
If I could just for a moment, like try to connect some of these religious questions you've brought up
Yes.
with the research I do on Anglo-Indian
Absolutely. Yeah.
community and things I've written. So if I go back, like 16, 17 years when I first began a master's program in which I ended up writing a thesis on Anglo-Indian history in the early 20th century. I think at that point that, okay, if I'm going to do professional work as a historian, I have to keep my, religious dimensions sort of aside. So I was doing more social and political history. And some of that is that, we sometimes, or I felt, I guess, okay, the academic environment, if they're going to take me seriously as a historian, then I kind of have to leave my life, as a priest and so forth, separate from that. It was Robin Andrews, whom you have
Yeah.
interviewed, who I began to collaborate with on some projects, and we started talking. And she, as well as ultimately my PhD supervisor, said, no, no, you have because you're a Catholic, because you're a priest, there are some special insights
Yeah.
and that you can have to the religious lives
Yeah.
of the people you're studying history. And so Robin and I began a religion research project on Anglo-Indian religious belief and practice.
Mm.
And we've published a little bit from that. We still can do more. Because we were essentially beginning to try to answer the obvious question. Anyone who meets Anglo-Indians knows that so many, the majority, vast majority, are people who are quite devout in practicing their faith. Christianity is an important part in an Anglo-Indian home, and even in how they speak, even in how Anglo-Indians speak about their experience of
Yeah.
life. The hand of God is in this.
Yeah.
I prayed for that.
Yeah.
They're connecting this world
Yeah.
with the spiritual world all the time, but it's always been kind of taken for granted, but not spoken about, written about by scholars. So
Yeah.
we wanted to end that silence
Yes.
on Anglo-Indian religion.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. There is, even as kids, and there would be no difference between our spiritual life and it was just integrated in our conversations. Like my daughter walks the dogs for our neighbor opposite the house because she's not doing too well. But a long time ago, when we lost our keys or something, I would tell them, like, when I was growing up, my mom would say, "Lost again, found again, St. Anthony," and the whole house, right? We'd just be like, you'll hear 5 people saying, "Lost again, found again, St. Anthony," looking for keys, right? And we find it. So my daughter came like, "Dad, I think she's Roman Catholic. She lost her keys or something. She lost the leash for her dogs." And she was saying something similar to that, So, but that's how it is, right? We would, it was so integrated. Is priesthood a profession, would you call it? Or what is it?
I mean, it is that too, but I would say it's a vocation, it's a calling. In the same way that, it's the same way, in the same way you might say marriage is more than just something you have the skill set for, or you're good at. You have a good marriage, or good. No, so it's something more ontological, which is to say, it's more about the who you are than the what you do.
Yeah, that's true. Because I was thinking about that. Is priesthood, is it like a profession? Then it got weird, right? Like, wait, if there are professional priests, then there are amateur priests, which makes no sense at all, right? Definitely a calling, yes. Are you reading? How do you treat Lent? Is there something you're reading or you're listening to? How do you focus in and draw yourself into these 40 days? Do you do anything special? If you can tell us a book to read or any devotion or a scripture or a book we can focus on.
Well, I think, and you don't have to be Catholic to do this, but every day during Lent, just like every day during the entire year, the Catholic Church has readings for the Mass, because there's a Mass celebrated every day. And those readings from the mostly from the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, and the Gospels, and then on Sundays also the epistles of St. Paul. I think the Scripture is just very rich, and I think that's definitely the go-to starting place for anyone who wants to really pray their way and take a spiritual journey through Lent, because especially in the Old Testament, these passages talk so much about real people's relationship with God and entering into a sense of repentance, confronting sin, individual as well as social.
Yeah.
The sin of the nation, as well as the sin of the individual. And how do you pray through that? Because a lot of people avoid that type of prayer because they feel ashamed even to speak of it, think of it, bring it up to God.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we were talking before about the stories that form us.
Yeah.
These are the faith stories that kind of form us and help us have the words and the patterns to do in our life what others have done in theirs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much time you have, but I'd definitely love to hear more about your work with Anglo-Indians and the history. When do you think do you see it anywhere close to first finishing it, or is it? I know a PhD. I have many friends who did their PhDs, and I've seen their regular updates on Facebook, and it's they fight with it, they struggle. I know it's a tough process.
I'll be done by the beginning of May. it'll be
Nice.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
But
Was
my dissertation is not actually on Anglo-Indians. It, it, I had intended it to be.
Yeah.
COVID interrupted my research, and it took 2 years and 3 months to get back into India on a research visa and that kind of thing. So it ended up being about a Catholic mission in North India, in Bihar, and kind of tracing how this mission handled all the tumultuous events leading up to independence, and then the first 15 years of the Republic of India, and it kind of gives a snapshot of Christians and how Christians thought of themselves in relation to the state, to the nation, to the majority
oh wow. Is
Hindu
there
population.
wow. Is there much? I'm sure there's plenty of data. There's a lot of. Do you do like a lot of? How do you go about? You just go to India and you just track down leads and you just interview people.
Well, not to interview so much because, like a lot of these things, hardly anyone is alive who
Yeah.
could speak about it. But
Yeah.
though I have done some of that social history, like earlier, I did a whole piece on Anglo-Indian experience of the partition and their
Yeah.
own decisions. Do we stay? Do we go?
Oh, you've done. Wait, you've done some work on that. On the
Yeah,
whole partition.
it's not published. I can work on doing
Yeah.
that later. But it was for my master's thesis.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
yeah, but all of those people have passed away now.
Yeah.
Even then, doing that in 2008 or nine, I guess, it was quite a small pool who were still
Yeah.
alive or still cogent enough to
Yeah. Yeah.
interview.
Ooh.
But it's mostly text, so my dissertation is mostly based in archival sources.
Yeah.
In this case, mostly church archival sources.
Awesome. Which is why I think people like Deborah Nixon and Dorothy are doing important work by just telling the stories that they've heard and just documenting it. You know.
And many ordinary Anglo-Indians are writing their memoirs. I have, I have a whole shelf here that's mostly Anglo-Indian writings about their own experiences. And
Oh
stories.
wow. When you get a moment, I'll say I would love to get all your book recommendations.
Sure.
Being a priest, right? Have you had to do any exorcisms, or have you heard of the stories? Is it a common thing? Is it a thing in the Catholic Church even?
It is. It is a thing in the Catholic Church. No, I haven't done any exorcisms. I guess most Catholic dioceses have one priest who's a exorcist,
really?
who's trained as such. I have no idea what the training entails. No idea. Beyond that's above my pay grade, as they say.
So if somebody called you, would you be? Would you have to do it? Like if say like, hey Brent, I need your help.
No, I would
You
then.
would-
I'd call the diocese and refer. And
Got it.
before they do an exorcism, obviously we know nowadays. The real question is this a spiritual malady,
Yeah.
or is it a psychiatric one, or something else? And so they don't
Yeah.
just rush into those things. They
Yeah.
make those distinctions.
Awesome. So, Brent, is there anything else you want to tell us about your work? How can we keep up with you? It seems like you have a lot of information, Brent, and I want to read everything you put out.
Sure.
Do you write? Do you publish anything?
Yes, yes, I do. I can send you a few things. So we've the things pertaining to Anglo-Indians. A lot of it, Robin Andrews and I have collaborated and co-authored some things, especially around Anglo-Indian religion and pilgrimage, including about Our Lady of Velankani. So
Nice.
there's
Yeah.
2 or 3 different pieces that are out there on that.
Is that on the International Anglo-Indian Journal? Is it there?
No, one's in a volume with Oxford University Press, another with Routledge, another with
Okay.
with the Journal for Contemporary Religion,
Okay.
and then I have a chapter in another, let's see, Palgrave Macmillan book on Anglo-Indian identity,
Yeah.
and it's really about an early 19th century story about really about who gets to speak for Anglo-Indians. And this is kind of it's not just an old question, it's
Yeah.
kind of it's a contemporary question too.
Yeah.
Because is it the association that speaks for Anglo-Indians? Who belongs to the association?
Yeah.
Who are leaders?
Exactly.
What about people who are poor
Yeah.
and don't have much of a voice? Who says what Anglo-Indian interests are?
Yeah.
Then and now.
Yeah.
I would just say, I want to just emphasize one thing. When the International Journal of Anglo-Indian Studies was founded by Adrian Gilbert in 1996, it was cutting edge in the sense that it was an open source journal.
Yeah.
Most academic journals are expensive, they're subscription based and so on. And he said, no, we need to have an open source journal. And it was kind of prescient because that's the direction that academic work has moved, to reduce the barriers. So you don't have to be, a professor in the academy to access this. And so I've tried to contribute to that in my own way by continuing to edit this journal with Robin for the last 10 years. And also at the regular Anglo-Indian reunions that some of your listeners probably have attended, and the next one is a year from now.
Are you going to that?
I will go to that,
Nice.
yeah. For the last maybe 5 of them, we've had a research showcase, which is to say that academics who are doing research projects present papers that anybody can understand. It's not, we're not using technical language or getting too down in the weeds, but present the research in a way that the whole Anglo-Indian community can learn about and give their feedback. Does this sound like us?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or an aspect of the collective history and identity that maybe people just weren't aware of.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was my reaction too when I was doing my research and I saw your name and I saw all these people's names. I was like, who are these people studying Anglo-Indians? Like, and why? Like, if it just did not seem like it was a topic that people were interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I started reading up and I'm like, what? People are genuinely, this is a serious field. So definitely I always recommend that website for everybody. It's to go and check out the articles there. It's a goldmine of information. Brent, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day.
Thank
I know
you.
You've got some meetings tomorrow. Thank you for all your
Great to talk
perspectives.
to you.
Yes, likewise.
And thanks for doing this wonderful project.
You bet. Thank you.